Good evening. Well, it's got to be evening somewhere in the world, isn't it? Now, I'm going to do a few videos. They're going to be a bit sort of Squierific. I've a secret love of Squiers. No secret now, is it? And I've owned a lot of them, and I own a few now. And I also do, of course, you know, as you learn, you fix things up and you sell them on. So I have some projects, some of which you can see behind me, in this time of great madness and lockdowns, and I'll be doing them. The first one is a Squier Precision base. Now, there's Squier means different things to different people. Of course, they started out as a very high quality Japanese instrument, and as we know now, we can get very high quality new Squiers, the classic vibe, etc., etc. There have been some low points, and there's been some almost points. Now I'm going to talk about an almost point, and that is the early Korean Squiers. Now I've got one here that I'm going to rebuild and turn it into hopefully the best bass it can be. And I'll just start. I'll show you a few bits and pieces with it, and I'll, you know, I won't show you pictures of me rebuilding it or anything. I don't set the camera up that way, but I'll show you some stills and things that I've done. But I'll start with, here's the neck. This is a Squier neck. It's a, I think it's about like a, what would it be, like a 91 or something like that. I think that's what it was when I dated it. Now, curiously enough, they've got the neck, as far as comparing it to a vintage Fender, it's very, very, very close. The back of it looks good, looks correct. Note the ambering of the finish here, so it's aging really nicely. The back feels very correct. Now the front feels a little bit flat. I'm guessing it's going to be around about a 9-inch radius on it, rather than the 7.5 or whatever was the vintage one. So some people who want, so in that case, it's a little bit like a current classic vibe neck, you could say. So what did they get right? Okay, it's got some Shaler, licensed by Shaler machines on it, and they look, there's nothing wrong with them at all. They're very, very good. Fret wear, I know the frets are a little soft in these because I had a guitar that the frets wore pretty quick. These aren't too bad. I'm not going to touch them because they feel nicely worn in. So, yep, and it's got the sort of silver logo. It all looks very, very classic. One thing to note, I'm pretty sure the neck, I think there's a timber join just here, and I don't think the Japanese ones had that, but I could be mistaken. But I think a lot of the early Korean ones did. But overall, that feels like a good old school Fender neck, definitely. Okay, I'm moving on. The bridge, it looks somewhat like a Fender bridge. It might be slightly thinner plate, I can't be certain. I dropped this one in the ultrasonic cleaner, gave it a bit of a clean, made sure all the screws work. It's got a little bit of patina on it, and I figured that's the best way to keep this one. I'm not changing that at all. Scratch plate. Ambered nicely. You can't see it in this light, can you? But it's sort of gone sort of cream and looks really good. Now these were drilled for the small pots, which I'll get to them in a minute. That's one thing, one irreversible mod I'll be doing is drilling these two to take a CTS or a better quality potentiometer and jack, etc. The body. Now here's where it gets a little bit interesting. Most of your early Japanese Squiers had, I can't remember, was it Sen or Sen Ash or something? But they were a solid timber, 3 or 4 pieces or whatever. And there were also, it's probably a little known fact, there were some MDF ones. Some of your cheaper Japanese ones were actually MDF, and they actually sound fine. So, but, you wouldn't change it. This is, I'm pretty sure, if I remember from the time, they were poplar ply. Now you think, oh, plywood, it's terrible. Well, it doesn't have to be. This one here, it's making a pretty good clonk. It's kind of high pitched sounding, and to me that sounds like it's going to be a very even, well behaved frequency response, good sustain. Why would you change it? Curious thing of note, it's been drilled for 2 different scratch plates, but I can see there's been no screws ever put in these other ones, so I don't know if someone's had this apart or was it an anomaly from the factory, because I know some of them had a 50 style scratch plate and some had a 60 style, so I couldn't say what the story is of this one, but I can only see evidence it's had 1 scratch plate on it, actually, the one that I just put down there. So plywood body, and you think, oh well, why would you keep that? Well, there's nothing wrong with this. It's going to sound absolutely fine. Now, subject of sound, some of these early Korean Squiers, that's where there was some serious cost cutting. Here's the old lumen pickups. The pickups are plastic bobbins, ceramic magnets. The pots were your mini pots. Now, there's nothing wrong with a mini pot if it lasts. These haven't lasted. There's nothing wrong with ceramic pickups, ceramic magnets and plastic bobbins if they sound good, and these don't sound any good. So this is where the big upgrade happens. I've got some economy Alnico eBay sort of pickups. Alnico magnets, it's the pole magnets. Fiber bobbins. Does that really affect sound? Probably not, but it is closer to the original spec things. Now what I have done, you can see I've got a little steel plate here. This is a little bit like the Telecaster thing. I like putting on the treble side a steel plate which messes with the magnetic field, the inductance of the pickup. Keep the bottom side playing. That it gives you a good, strong, clear sort of signal. The top side, I find on P basses they sound sometimes a bit bright or a bit sort of nosy, and you want them sort of slightly more rounded, so you've got an even response across the strings. I think what Leo Fender was thinking at the time is he wanted the lows low and the highs high. That makes sense, but most people don't play that way. So they want even response across E, A, D, G. So I'm going to see if this little thing, I'll experiment with this a bit, makes any difference to the sound. Pots, I've got a few choices here. Trying to keep to sort of vintage spec stuff, but that's a CTS pot there. Here's another CTS pot here, never really been used, and a nice new CTS jack socket. So I'll take some photos of the project as we go along, probably to some silly backing music, and you can see how this instrument might shape up, and see if I can turn the early 90s P bass with good bones into a very, very classic feeling and playing instrument. All right, that will do for now.